Shall I get straight away into the topic, or you want to have some conversation before that? You want to know something about me or zero code before getting the topic? You're welcome. Okay then. So I'll get into the topic today. So what we are going to touch base upon today is a basic introduction to the application. What is an app and what constitutes an app? What are the things that we need to know about app before we get into the application development? Because this group is a mixed bag of people from tech background, some are from art, or some might be knowing what the application development is all about, some might not. So I'll be touching upon the basics today. So let's get started. Can you give me the sharing permission, please?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I have enabled.
Okay. So before getting into the actual content, so let me ask one question. So what do you know about an application? Someone can answer. Are there someone who know about what is an application and who has some exposure to the application development? Or who wants to try answering this question? Okay then, I'll move to the next slide. So what is an app? Application, in short form, we call it as an app. So it's kind of a software that can be installed or run on your device, whether it's computer, whether it's your phone or tablet or whatever other devices that you have. For example, Xbox. So these are the softwares that either installed or directly run through browsers. Generally, when you say an app, we most frequently refer it to a mobile application, but there are other kind of applications as well that we'll know in the next slide. So what kind of applications generally we have? So based on from which device we are accessing that application or the technology that we use to build an application. So generally, four types of applications that we encounter. The first is the web apps. Means the application runs in your browser. So for the application to run in your browser, you definitely need internet access to use it. Whatever the zero code application that you're going to use in the coming days to build the apps, that is a web app. So you need a browser with an internet connection to access this particular application. So these applications are generally, again, we'll go to the details of what are the various elements of the application. But the HTML, CSS, JavaScripts at the front end that people use, and the frameworks like Angular, Backbones, and these kind of applications require a smaller amount of memory space in your device because these are running from your browser. They are not installed in your system, so they don't need much of a space. Some of the examples that you can give is your Netflix, your Google Docs, or a Dropbox. There are so many applications, web apps. Next is native apps. Native apps are the applications which are specifically designed for a particular platform. You have Android, so Android applications. You go to the Play Store and you download whatever the applications. So the most of them are the native Android applications. So they are developed for Android. If you try to install that in other devices which doesn't run Android, you won't be able to. In the same way, you can take example of your iOS apps or the desktop apps that you install on your Windows, which comes with .leaks. So you cannot install those things in Android. So these are specifically designed for that particular platform. And why these kind of applications will be developed? Where there is like a very high performance is required, where they need to use the devices processing power and memory optimally. So those kind of applications can be built as a native apps. And as I said, these are targeted to a specific platform. And then there is a hybrid app. So what are these hybrid apps? Hybrid apps is sort of a combination of your web and native app. So these hybrid applications, they they are generally a web-based things, but they run as a mobile application, a native application. They use certain functionality of your native applications. So they are very easier and quicker to create because these are like developed as a web application, and they're packaged as a native application. So to learn something and to learn the development of a native application is much more complex than you developing the web application. So hybrid application has the beauty of a web app as well as the native app. And generally these applications we don't use where there is very high performance is needed. But those high like the gaming application, stuff like that, where you need a very high performance, but most of the applications doesn't need that much of a performance. So most of the apps can be built as a hybrid app. Some of the examples are your Instagram, your Twitter, the BMW application. These are all hybrid applications. They are not a completely truly native applications. They are much more hybrid applications. And then there is something called progressive web apps or PWS. So these are your typical websites, but they have some sort of a functionality which is like an app. Okay, so the experience that you get is like an app experience. These applications also run in your web browser. Okay? They can access some part of your device's hardware. Some of the examples are like the Starbucks application and Clipboard. So these are like your progressive web applications. So what we are going to concentrate on and develop with zero code mostly are the web applications and the hybrid applications. So let's look at like what an application constitutes. Like what is a basic architecture of an application. So we're taking the web applications for reference here. So what happens? So what are the elements that are there in your web application? So any application that you take, majorly there are two elements. One is your front end and one is your back end. So your front end is where you are as a user is going to interact with it. So like whenever you are filling a form or whenever you are doing a search, so you are actually interacting with the front end, which is built with the front end technologies. Just HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or Angular, whatever that we talked about. So these things are built with the front end technologies. And then there is a backend part. So what the backend part holds? The backend part is where all your information is stored, accessed, manipulated. So you have your database, you have your file systems where you store documents, pictures, and all. So everything is there in your backend application. So that backend is generally developed with the languages like Java, PHP, .NET, Python. So there is a backend and there is a front end. So when user interacts with the front end collects the information from user, whether that is when you are filling the form, it collects your details, or you are looking for something, it collects the information like what exactly you're looking for, and that will be sent to your backend as a request. So that the backend takes that request, processes it, finds the relevant information, packages it, and that information or the data will be sent as a response to the front end. Then the front end gets that particular response, and then it formats that response and displays it to you. So this is what happens in any typical application. So let's look at like how a typical application works when you are actually trying to sign up. Okay, so you have to find some a cool new website and you want to create an account. So what you do, you go to your the sign up button and click it. When you click the sign up button, it redirects you to a page where it displays a form asking some of your details, whether that's your name, whether it's your email or phone number or date of birth. Each application asks like either similar information or some different information as well, based on the information that they need. So you typically get a form and you fill up the form and then you click on submit. So what happens when you submit that information will be sent to your backend. So the front end also you can call it as a client side, and the backend you can call it as a server side. So this data is collected at your front end, and when you submit, that will be sent to the backend. There, what happens at the backend? So the information is added to your database. Database is place where the entire information is stored like a columns and rows. Typically use spreadsheet, right? So that kind of a structure is there. There are number of columns and rows that your information or data will be stored. And it also does some validations whether you have already signed up or you are new to it. And then if the validations is true, so it stores the information and it redirects you to a different page. So it sends a response. Based on the response, if that account creation is successful, you are redirected to a page where it displays the message that your account creation is successful, and then displays the relevant page where you can access the application. So this is how a typical sign up flow works. Let's look at some of the other important components of an application. So there is something called user interface. So whatever the front end that we talked about, so those are the user interfaces which you are as a user interacts with. So these user interfaces are the pages which display some of the data, the visual elements, and the interactive elements. Like whenever you open a Google page, for example, Google search, you get a typical a big field. Sorry, there is some noise. Can you mute? Okay. So then there is a big field where you can input field where you can enter your search keyword, and there is a button to search. You have a Google logo and some information or links. So this is your user interface. Like that, when you click on the search and you're displayed with all the search results. So that is another page on the user interface where you get all the search results. And then there is something called a module. So what typically a module is, means like these are like set of pages, and in some cases the services or the relevant data, they are put together under a module which represents an independent block of functionality an application holds. Okay. For example, if you take your Amazon, any online shopping, there is a cart. So in that cart, you have whatever the items that you have added cart, that will be displayed. That is one page. And when you click pay now, you get the payment information and the other message pages where it will show the messages whether payment is successful or not. There are like set of pages which are relatively integrated with each other or stitched together to create a particular functionality. So that can be called as a module. So these are like grouping of pages together and the relevant services. And then we have something called data query. So what links the front end and the back end? So the front end, in the previous screen saw that front end sends a request and the back end sends a response. So these requests are sent through queries. So there is a query that runs which provides some information to the backend and also which gives like what it need as a response. So the backend processes that query and sends a response. So these queries are something like, okay, uh, get me all my emails in the inbox, or get me an email sent from some X. So these are like queries that you send. I'll after this we'll showcase some applications that we use daily, and then we'll talk about it in more detail. And then there are APIs. So what APIs typically do is they transmit the data between different applications. So for example, you have a Google map that you are integrating in your application. So you need information from the Google map and display that in your application. And whatever the interaction that we you do with the Google Map in your application, you want to send that information back and get the results from the Google Maps. So how that happens? You have an API to access the Google Map. So through that API, you communicate back and forth with the Google like that. So you have APIs that can be used to communicate between different applications. In some cases, even you can use these APIs to communicate internally within the application as well, but typically they are used to communicate between different applications. And there are some background processes that run. So these background processes, they run behind scenes. So as a user, you don't see those processes running. For example, taking some backups or sending some notifications, stuff like that. These will happen at the back end. So these, if you are using your WhatsApp, okay, you might see some sort of a notification where it's taking the backup. So you, as a user, you might be doing a setting to take daily backups or something, but you are not actually daily initiating that. So this process will run at the background, and you are going to share something which is called as a workflow. Workflow is like a sequence of steps from start to end. There are, let's say, 10 steps that a typical process has, which, so if that process has to be succeeded, all these 10 steps has to be done by the user. So these are like 10 kind of steps, or a number of steps that are stitched together. So there is a starting point, there is an ending point, in between there are a number of steps. In each step have some sort of a functionality that a user has to do, or a system has to perform some actions. So it's a sequence of steps together. We call it as a workflow. So what I'm trying to do is just touch upon few words and give you little context of it. So when you start practicing zero code and developing application, you gain more knowledge about these things, and then where we then can discuss much more about these individual items. Right now, I don't want to bombard you with the information. Okay, so I'll stop a while here and take some questions if you have. Anyone has any question?
Sir, what is workflow, sir?
Workflow is a sort of sequence of steps. For example, okay, let's take some random scenario. Okay.
Okay.
You are you are actually applying for a job. Okay. So you fill up a form.
Okay.
That form needs to
Okay.
go to a recruiter. Okay.
Okay.
Recruiter then looks at your details.
Yeah.
And then if some information is missing, he'll ask you back. Otherwise, what he'll do is like he'll put his comments, and he'll forward that application to
Next step of process.
manager. Okay, the manager looks at it, and if he deems it fit, he'll probably send it back saying that let's call him for an interview.
Okay.
And you'll get the information like you are selected for interview to come to the interview at particular date and time. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this process is initiated when you actually fill up that form, and this
Okay.
process ends, or this workflow ends, when you get that information like you are selected on you now. Okay. In between, you have two steps.
Okay.
So one is it goes to a recruiter, and then it goes to the manager. So this entire thing is called a workflow. So generally,
Okay.
typically most of these workflows happen manually when there is not much of a digitization happen. So you tend to fill up a physical form. You a paper, a form printed on a paper. You if you remember, you fill up that form. You send it in the post, and then they actually take that information and record in their systems. Everything used to be manual. Now with the digitization, these workflows are automated. So when you fill up a form in your system, you typically browse a web app or mobile app, whatever it is. You fill up your form there, and in automatically it knows whom to send. You don't need to enter the information like whom this form has to. So it knows, it sends to that particular uh, person, and then after that particular person can view certain information and have certain actions. Can only
Okay.
perform those actions and goes to the next stage.
Okay.
So this is a typical workflow.
Okay.
Sir,
What
I want to.
what is hybrid app, sir?
Hybrid app is a combination of your web app and native app. So typically your web app, when you build a web app, you build it with whatever, for example, a website that you are trying to come up with. What do you do? A website, you create a HTML page, you add some JavaScript, and if there are forms, certain things, you have some PHP or some certain functionality there. Okay. So like that, a web app has, as I explained, a front end and back end. With front end are mostly these HTML pages that you have. But a native app, Android, if you take an Android, okay, you're not generating the HTML pages there, right?
Okay. Mostly we use which apps will be used in zero code.
Zero code, we develop web apps and the hybrid apps.
Okay.
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 So these hybrid apps, you can install it in your mobile. Like you can package that as an Android app or the iOS app, and then you can install those apps in your mobile devices. It'll run like a native app only. So the beauty of hybrid apps is like you have one code which is good for your web app as well as your mobile app.
Okay.
Otherwise, you have to write two kinds of codes, one for your web app and one for your native app, and you have to maintain both of these codes. Now with this hybrid apps, you have one code that you can use to create these two kinds of applications.
Okay.
Hello, excuse me, sir.
Sir,
Yeah.
so all projects support PWA, sir.
Hello.
Not able to hear you. Can you be little loud?
Yes, sir. I mean, what is API interface, sir?
See, API is typically a service which is like a connection between different applications. You need a data from one application to another application. In that scenario, you write an API. Okay. So that is kind of a
Thank
link
you.
between two applications. So you will get to know more about API in the coming days. But right now, I want you to just think of it as a link between different applications or somewhere in different modules as well in some cases. Okay, it's kind of a link. As you've seen, there is a link between a front end and back end. Okay, that can be a data query or an API as well. Particularly between two applications, you use API.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, sir. This is Lakshmi Bhavani.
Now, Lakshmi.
My question is difference between web apps, progressive web apps. Sir.
Progressive web apps are more like your websites, but they're not displayed as a typical website. The look and feel is somewhat like a web application. So it holds some kind of a interactivity, some functionality it offers, but it's typically a website. Whereas web app is a application than a website. The website typically provides you information, okay, which doesn't need you to really create an account and access information. Whereas web application is more with the interactive elements where you input some information or you request something, then it processes and sends you back.
Okay, sir.
Does that answer your question, or you want me to answer?
Yes, sir.
Sir, can you explain the background process?
Okay. What happens in typical backend is like your front end sends some request. Let's say you're searching. You want to search for best restaurants in Hyderabad. So that is your search keyword.
Yes, sir.
The front end collects this information, this keyword, and it sends this to the backend, asking that, okay, can you give me the list of best restaurants in Hyderabad? So this keyword is sent through a query to the backend. Backend gets that keyword and it searches the information stored in the database where all the restaurants are listed with their addresses, their reviews and all. So it searches it and it takes the restaurants which are placed in Hyderabad, which has good reviews from the users. And then it sends that as a response to your front end. Now front end got a list of restaurants. It displays those results in a page. And this is a very simple flow. There might be a number of conditions that are there. You might ask like best restaurants in Hyderabad rating 4 and above. Are the restaurants which serve only vegetarian and are rated 4 and above. So as you dig deep, drill and filter your results with more keywords, the database or the query that you send will have these informations, and there is more processing that will be done with various filters. A very simplified example is what we talked about. These are the examples where you need to check with multiple factors, satisfy multiple conditions, and then get your results. For that, there are a lot of operations that happen in the background. Okay, so all those things you won't be able to see as a user. And there's more information about what is the back our database, what happens with the back. Sorry, at the back end. That will be explained to you in the next few sessions.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anything else? If not, I'll move and show you some applications that we'll use, and then I'll give you a sneak peek into zero code interface before we close. Okay, shall I go?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It's okay.
Sir.
So this is your Gmail. So I'm not going to show my inbox here. Sorry. You're looking at a few emails which are labeled as Pocket. So you have something called a Pocket application in Firefox. They send me few emails because I subscribe to the Pocket. So here, when I click on this label Pocket, you see that there are almost like 123 emails the Pocket has sent to me. And you can further refine that search, like you might want these emails for a particular time, let's say older than 1 week or older than a month, older than 6 months. Okay, you can mention like only display emails which has attachments, and there are other number of things that you can mention. You can mention like, okay, display emails sent by a particular person or sent to a particular person or has subject as this kind of a subject or has these words in it or the size of it or the date, the number of things that you can mention and filter your emails and display only those results. Okay. Also, you can click on these various links and those particular emails only will be shown. So this is your typical user interface where you have the information listed, you have various elements to interact with. Okay, so you're selecting something here, you're entering something here, you're clicking on something here, or you're scrolling the list like this. So these are all the elements of your user interface. So when you, let's say, click on a particular email, what happens is the ID of this email, you can see there is some ID in encoded format. So as a user, you won't be able to read it, but the backend can read it because it has the key to actually read this particular information, decode and read it. So this information is sent to your backend. The backend gets that information, which is typically the identification of your particular email, and then it looks for that particular ID in your emails, and whatever the other information that particular ID holds, it sends that as a response, and front end takes that response and displays that information in another page. So you can see this is a newsletter. So this is a newsletter that is sent with that email. So this information is sent as a response from the backend. So this is a typical flow of your email. Let's look into something called Amazon, which we use regularly, right? Online shopping or e-commerce application or a marketplace. Here, when you sign in, you get a page where it displays some of the items which are like promoted. It displays list of items you got it previously, and then there are a lot of other information as well, various categories. So all this information has to come from your backend. So whenever you log in, okay, so that information is sent to the backend. So on successful login, what it does is it collects all these information from the database and sends it as multiple services. So today's deal might be a service, a query, to which it sends the information like what are today's deals. You have another section called like best selling ebooks. So this is sent as another service. So all these multiple services come into this page, and this page collects those responses and displays the information in the specified blocks. So this is typically self-help books is a block. For this block to display information, we request information from the backend that will be sent, and that information is displayed. And how you display is you have a basic structure, and then you have something called a style sheet, which gives the information like how to display that, how to beautify and display that. So we'll discuss more about these structures and styling tomorrow, but this is what happens in the flow. And when you actually go and search, let's say you're searching for mobile phones, okay, so what happens is this is sent to the server and it requests the information about mobile phones only. So now it has to display only the mobile phones. So it displayed all the phones that are available. Then you can further refine the search. You can say like, I only want this particular brand, only display me Apple phones. Or you can say, I want phones priced under 1,000 rupees only. So there are a lot of ways that you can filter these results. So this filtering happens at the front end, but whatever that you choose in the filters, these will be sent as a request to the backend with a query, and then the backend processes all these keywords and displays, sends a response which will be displayed for those particular keywords only. Let's go and look at Facebook. Here also the same thing happens. When you log in, what it does, it displays all the posts from your friends. So these are all how it knows who are your friends. So that is the information which is already stored in the database when you select and add friends to your account. So it knows who are your friends are and who you are, and sends the information accordingly. And when you click a certain post, again it knows what is the ID of this particular post, and then displays a page with the information of that particular post. Let's look at your Irctc. Here you have a form to enter, like from, let's say, from this station or this place to this place you want to go. You want to travel on this particular date. Some date there. Okay. And so searching what are the trains available. So you, as a user, you fill up a form with certain information. That information is sent to a backend, and backend processes that request and sends a response towards that particular search criteria. So it displays all the trains that will travel from that date on that date from that particular location to the destination, and it displays the availability of seats for various classes. So like that, you take any application, the typical process and typical components of that application are almost same. What changes is something we call it as the business logic, where how much of a processing of that information that you need to do, what are the various conditions under which you need to look into that information, what are the various calculations that you need to perform on that, and what are various types of interactions that you need to provide, and something we call it as access permissions. So some information you want to display only to that user. So when you log into your Facebook, it has to show only your post, not my post to you, right? Not everyone's post to you. So that is something called, we call it as access permission, where the information will be shown only personalized to you or your personal information, not everyone's information. So that way we maintain the security aspect. So the various other things that will come into the application development, but a typical application, we have only these basic elements and these operations. Okay, so let me take you to the zero code application. Again, I don't want to talk too much about of zero code application today. I just want to show you and touch upon few of the things that we have discussed previously, and then our team will take you through each of these particular modules and functionality and explain to you in greater detail. So when you log in to your zero code, you can see a list of applications. Okay, so these are the various applications that can be built in zero code. So you can add applications, new application, and that application will be created. Inside this application, you have modules. Module is, again, as I said, it is group of pages that represents about an independent functionality or a feature. Okay. So these modules will be having different pages. Okay, so when you go to a module called sampling, you have these pages here. When you go under module, you have different pages here. So these are all the pages. And you select a page. So these pages are connected to these data tables through these services. Okay, here we are using APIs to do the internal communication as well. So you have your data tables in your database, and you have the pages. This is your page, and this page is connected to these various tables, and the interaction between this page or user interface and the database happens through these services. Okay, and let's look at data sets. So these data sets are typical your data tables which holds certain information. So what are all the fields that are stored in this particular data set is like when it is created, by whom it is created, what time, and when it is modified, etc., etc. So you can add number of fields to it. Let's say you want to add something called a name. Name. There's a new field created as name. Like that, you can add number of fields here. So this is your typical data set, and there are number of processes that we can add. So these processes workflows probably we'll get into them in later classes because they are little more complex to understand. So what you typically need to know is like an application which holds modules. These modules have pages. They are linked to your data sets, and these data sets and the pages are linked to the APIs. Okay, so this is what your typical application setup is. Okay. This is what you need to know today. All the other things you will get to know once you go through all these sessions. So these things again, next sessions only you can look into it. So I'll stop here. Let me go back to the presentation. So you have few assignments that you need to do today, just to know how much you got to know about application and application development, and any questions that you encounter with while trying to understand an application. So there are 3 assignments. First one is you need to explain how search works. Okay. Previously, you looked at a basic sign up flow where you enter information in a form, you click the sign up button, that particular information is sent to your backend where it validates whether you have an account already there or not, and if it's not there, then it creates a new account and sends a response back. Based on that response, you will be displayed with a success page. So that is a typical sign up flow, how it works. Now in the same way, I want you to list down things that happens when you try to search something. You don't have to be perfect and you don't have to be too technical about it. In general sense, what happens is what I need. What happens on the front end and what do you think happens at the back end? And then in the next assignment, I want you to list a number of modules if you are building an online store. Online shopping cart is what you're trying to build. So what do you think can be a list of modules there? I can give you an example. One is cart. A shopping cart can be a module. So I want you to think about it. So you can also search and look into, and then list the number of modules it can have. You don't have to list down all the modules. What do you think are the modules there? You can list a 5 or 10, whatever that you can. And then I want also you to list down 3 differences between a native app and a hybrid app. So this particular slide will be shared to you after this, and I encourage you to browse information about native apps and hybrid apps, and then list down 3 differences between a native app and a hybrid app. So these are the 3 assignments that I want you to work on today. And when we meet in the evening, I want to look into some of this and probably answer some of your questions while working on these assignments. Okay, so that is it from my end today. Let's meet in the evening. So any questions right now you have on these assignments, feel free to ask.
Anyone has any questions?
Yeah, it's clear, ma'am. It's clear. It's I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, fine. We will share the assignment. Okay, please ensure everybody submits the assignment before 4 p.m. today, so that we can have a discussion in the evening session. And in case you have any other doubts, you can get it clarified. You can send it to us by writing us an email. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so see you in the evening at 4 p.m. Goodbye.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks all. Thanks, Veena.
Thanks, sir. Thanks,
Yeah,
ma'am.
bye. Have a good
Thank
night.
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.